In this video, I'm going to give a whole bunch of tips and advice of things I've learned from many trips over the past 6 years or so to both Kenya and Uganda. Go over visa information, where to stay, where to go, etc. Okay, so right here I'm in Nairobi, Kenya. This is Airbnb rental. I like this apartment complex a lot. I like the colorful buildings, and I stayed here for about 10 days, I think. It was $30 a night. Nairobi is a good place for Airbnb. You get quite a few apartments in good location, and the cost ranges from, I'd say, around a little bit less than $30 a night up to 100 or so. This area I'm in now is called Parklands, and it's right next to Westlands. Parklands is a bit more peaceful. It's full of a lot of large apartment buildings, and it was a nice place to stay. And you're also very close to Westlands. It's adjacent to Westlands. At Westlands, you've got a couple of big malls, Westgate Mall, Sarit Center. You've got the Oval, which is a great place. They have a 24-hour cafe and some really nice restaurants there as well. Let me talk about how to get around town. Uber is very big in Nairobi, and they also have a strong competitor it used to be called Taxify. I think they just changed their name to Bolt. So if you're going to Nairobi and you plan on being there for a while, I would first of all, I would take a unlocked phone, like maybe a Samsung S5 if you could afford that, and download both apps. Now, I took both several times each. Bolt is Bolt, they seem to arrive faster, and it seems to be about 10% cheaper at least. And that I had that reinforced by some locals who said they usually take Bolt because of those reasons as well. Now, another reason to have a local phone with a local SIM card is a lot of times the drivers will call you up, and they obviously can't call you if you're still using your iPhone from Canada. And they won't call you up, and maybe they're a little bit confused as to exactly where you are. Let's talk about visas for Kenya and Uganda. In both countries, you can get a visa at the airport, a single entry visa for $50. They want the payment to be made in US dollars, so bring some. And they've also got something called a East Africa visa, which applies to 3 countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda. And so if you're going to be traveling to two of those countries, or even all 3 of them during your stay, it's a good idea. It costs you $100, and basically just allows you to go freely between those 3 countries anytime you want to. I believe I believe it's good for 90 days. I noticed actually last time I was going to Uganda, I looked on the internet, and there can be some misinformation on the internet, so you have to search carefully. For example, I believe on the Uganda government website they stated that as of some day in 2016 that you can only get electronic visa or visa, e-visa I believe it's called, and they wouldn't no longer accept visa on arrival. That's just not true. As of right now, it's not true at all. As a matter of fact, I don't even think you can get the East Africa visa over the internet. So if you have any anxiety at all about getting a visa to Kenya or Uganda, and you're from United States or Canada or Australia, New Zealand, in pretty much any country in Europe, I'm sure China, Japan, it's just not going to be a problem. So I would not be worried whatsoever. What happens if you get the e-visa? There's 2 separate lines at the airport for both countries, I believe. And the e-visa, if you've gotten an e-visa, you'll get in a line that does move a bit faster depending on how many planes have arrived at that time. The visa on arrivals takes a little bit longer, but it's just not a problem. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the money situation in both Kenya and Uganda. Both countries in the major cities have many, many banks. It's amazing how many banks you'll see, and a lot of them have ATM machines. Most of the ATM machines seem to run on the include the Visa network. So if you've got a bank card from the U.S. or Canada that works with the Visa network, that would be an ideal situation. You do see a couple now they take MasterCard, and most restaurants and stores will only take Visa, in my experience. I usually try and take quite a bit of U.S. dollars as cash. The one thing to watch out for, though, is make sure you get 50s, or even I think hundreds are pretty acceptable now. But I usually just take 50s and make sure they're new. For example, last time I was there, I had 150 and it looked brand new, but there was a small rip in the bottom, just a small rip. But nobody would exchange the money just because of the small rip. The ATM machines are for the most part reliable, although you will see you will have more situations where the card gets rejected. Sometimes it just gets rejected for some stupid reason and you can't really figure out why. In that case, you just have to go somewhere else. Usually when I book a flight to Africa, I'm going to go online and use one of the more popular websites for booking flights, such as Kayak or Skyscanner.net. But when you're within Africa and you want to move around, let's say from Kenya to Uganda, or perhaps you want to go from Nairobi to the coast, it's better to use one of the local airlines. So let me go ahead and give you some of the local ones. Now, these airlines I do not believe are represented on kayak.com or skyscanner.net. So you're not going to see flights. If you do a search, you're not going to see those flights listed. And you can save a lot of money just by going directly to the website and booking directly. Okay, so I took one flight from Entebbe to Nairobi, and I used Jumbo Jet. The website is jumbojet.com, and I believe they fly between Kenya, Uganda. I think they may fly to some other places like Tanzania and Zanzibar. But check out their website if that's what you want to do. If you're within Kenya, there's absolutely no need to ever to bounce around in a bus for 6, 7, 8 or more hours. The flights are very cheap. You can go, for example, from Nairobi to Diani Beach, and if you go at a certain time of a certain day and time, you can get it for as cheap as 4,000 Kenya shillings, which is about $40 US. So we've got. Let me put up some other websites. We've got fly540.com, and I believe there's another airline called FlySax, and they're part of Fly 540, I believe. You've got Kenya Airways, you've got Air Kenya, and there's a new one that had some really good pricing from Nairobi to Diani Beach, and that would be Silverstone Air. A friend of mine used them and got a really good deal going from Ukunda to Nairobi. One thing you'll notice about Kenya and Uganda is so many pharmacies or chemists all over the place on every street. I believe many of the locals, instead of going to a doctor, they'll just go to the chemist and describe the symptoms, and the chemist will give a recommendation. Malaria is a bit of a problem. Now, I remember trying to buy malaria pills in Canada, and they're so much more expensive than they are in Africa. I believe it was like $98 for the same pills that I could get in Kenya for $6 or $7. That's how big a difference it was. So I would definitely consider stocking up on those, and you can get other prescription medicine without a prescription in these countries. One other note I forgot to mention about visas, or actually entering the airport, is the only inoculation I've ever been required to show, and that's for many trips to East Africa and some trips to West Africa, is yellow fever. You need yellow fever certificate. It's like a yellow card, and I'm really not sure what happens if you don't have one. I think they're going to ask you to get it done at the airport. Food in Africa, I really love African food, and it's just I don't think most people have any problem eating African food. It's just really not that much different. Most of the time when I went into an African restaurant, I just asked the waitress or waiter what's good, and they bring you a couple plates of something, and sometimes you don't even know the name of it, but it usually tastes great. For example, in Kenya, you've got ugali, you've got michicha, which is kind of like spinach, and I would go ahead and try. Just go in a restaurant, like I said, ask for what's good, and I'm sure in most cases you'll be more than happy. Doing laundry in Africa, you'll find very few washing machines, drying machines in Africa. Most of the laundry is still done by hand. You don't see many laundromats. Maybe in some of the high-end malls you'll have one, but then you have to gather up your clothes, take them there, and then next day pick them up again. Usually what I do is if I'm staying in a hotel, I'll just ask the cleaning lady to do it and pay them to do that. Sometimes they ask you to not tell the hotel that they're cleaning your clothes. That's fine. I don't want it. I'm happy to give them some extra money. Tipping in Africa is a lot different than, for example, in Canada or the U.S., where you're expected to pay 15% tip. Most people in Africa don't leave tips. Me, I almost always leave a tip when I go to a restaurant. Most of the time when I leave at a hotel, if I've been there for a week or 2 weeks, I'll give the cleaning ladies a little bit of money. So it's not expected, but it's a good thing to do. In Kenya and Uganda, you're going to spend a lot of time negotiating, and most prices are very flexible. Big one is at the airport when you're getting your taxi, or in Nairobi, for example, you can actually get an Uber from the airport, which is great. But most the airports, you have to get a taxi, and the first price, never take the first price they're gonna give you. For example, in Uganda, the first price is going to be maybe 120,000 Uganda shillings, and I'll say something like, "Oh, last time I was here, I only paid 70," and then you just kind of work from there and end up around 80 or 90. That applies to other things as well. If you're going to a shop for example, in Diani Beach, there's many shops at the side of the street, and the first price is going to be outlandish, so you just bargain. Try not to take transportation if the transportation is sitting right at, like for example, if there's taxis waiting at a touristy mall, or tuk-tuks waiting at a touristy mall. For example, in Diani Beach, I would never take the tuk-tuks that were waiting at the shopping center I went to quite often. I would just start walking down the street and take one from there. Nightlife. Obviously, it depends on the city, but I will say Kampala has probably one of the best nightlife scenes in the entire world. I've been to many places. Nairobi is very good as well. People in these cities, in the United States and Canada, a lot of people just stay home and watch Netflix or play video games or whatever. But here, people like to go out. The clubs are open all night, sometimes till 5, 6, 7 in the morning. Once you go out in Africa, you'll be quite disappointed when you go home if you ever decide to go to a club again when you go back to where you came from. I see in the comments a lot, is Africa dangerous? And no, it's not dangerous. For example, the area around Eiffel Tower in Paris, France, is the pickpocket capital of the world. I'm sure you have more chance of getting hurt or robbed in Paris or Barcelona, Spain, which is also another pickpocket hotspot, than you would in Uganda or Kenya. For example, in Kampala, Uganda, they don't want to hurt you. But they want your phone, okay, or they want your gold chain that you forgot to take off. And I made that mistake once. I was riding in the back of a boda. We were trapped in traffic. This is it's like 4 or 5 years ago, and a kid, maybe 16 years old, came up and ripped my gold wrist chain off and ran away. And there's pickpockets. You have to worry about that. When you put your wallet in your front pocket, and do not, under any circumstances, wear any kind of gold chains. When you're using your phone, hold it with both hands, hold it close to your body, because I remember in Kampala I had someone try and go over my back and steal my phone, but I had both hands. I was leaning against the wall and kind of wrestled around, and he did not get the phone. So just be careful about things like that. It's mainly phones and any type of jewelry. Do not wear any jewelry whatsoever. It's very common to have a power outage in both Kampala and Uganda, 2 or 3 times a week, maybe more. So I would recommend you take the best power bar you can afford. Actually, I've been watching these YouTube videos from this Bulgarian guy who rode a bicycle from Canada, the Yukon, all the way down to Argentina. And he had one video where he showed what gear he used, and he used this Anchor power bar, and he also had a solar power bar. So I'll just show you those on Amazon, and he recommended them, so I'm going to recommend them as well. It's like I said, buy the best one you can afford. So that's about it for now. I'm going to put links to all those airlines I was talking about in the description section, and rest of this video is just me walking back to my apartment. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Nairobi Kenya.